A warm welcome to your Barbados Today Evening News Update for Monday, June 28th. Health authorities say the country has all the necessary measures in place to respond to the expected arrival of more visitors and the inherent threat of more infectious variants of the COVID-19 virus reaching our shores. This assurance comes amid concern about the impact of the Delta variant in the United Kingdom, which has become the dominant variant there, forcing a delay in the easing of restrictions. But Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kenneth George says authorities are on top of the situation and current border measures are strong enough to identify and handle potential threats.
It's based on public health. We can't physically stop the importation of variants. What we can do is ensure that our public health responses are most appropriate. What we have done is put some measures in place that persons traveling from the subcontinent have a longer quarantine period. So that longer quarantine period is 7 complete days and then being retested. Persons who are coming from the United Kingdom must remain in quarantine for 5 days and be tested on day 6. This is the unvaccinated individuals. If you're vaccinated, the public health evidence shows that the likelihood of 2 things, one, getting severe disease is remote, and the likelihood of you transmitting disease is low. So we still believe that if you're fully vaccinated, and we can prove that you're fully vaccinated, that when you arrive in Barbados, you will be tested, and based on that test result, you will be allowed to be released from quarantine. So still, all persons coming to Barbados require a PCR test at least 3 days prior to arrival. If they are vaccinated and their information is accepted by the public health officials at the airport, they are either tested at the airport or tested at their hotel. They remain in quarantine for 24 hours and released once their test results are negative.
Frustrated members of government's Transport Augmentation Program, TAP, parked their buses today in protest to appeal to government to abolish or significantly slash the existing 12.5% participation fee that is deducted from their gross earnings. Many of the operators who parked their vehicles in an open area on the Mighty Grind Highway this morning said the tax is painful, and at month end, they're struggling to buy food because their gross earnings, sometimes under $2,000, must also finance vehicle insurance and maintenance and pay drivers, among other commitments. Chairman of the TAP Committee, Christian Yearwood, said they are anxious for talks to address their concerns.
We have been trying to get our grievances listened to by the minister and the powers that be, and thus far we have been unsuccessful at getting the meeting that we've politely and professionally asked for. And this has been going on since January. We have documented and we've sent letters to the Transport Board, the chairman and the Transport Board, and thus far we have not gotten a response or the decency and to have a sit down. And really and truly all we're just asking for is a discussion to have our matters heard so that we can negotiate on a better way forward. Because at the moment there are a lot of our members who are struggling within the program. They feel trapped, and we all want what is best for both parties, but at the moment it seems to be very one-sided.
Committee Vice Chairman Rodney Bellamy said the members are under severe pressure and they need urgent relief.
This year we've seen, unlike last year when the 12.5 was eased during the first lockdown through the COVID, we found that this year it has been unbearable. A lot of us are out of business, vans parked, broken down, and all of us are struggling to keep the vehicles working at this point in time. And if you do a calculation, if you do the figures on paper, you can see that the 12.5% eats into the money that's required to pay insurances, road taxes, and so on. And some of us are now starting on our first time on the permit, and those fees are Yes, we are thankful for the part payment plan, but at the same time, we're making losses. And this has been going on for 6 months, and we have been asking for some discussion. And I think in all fairness, we should have the opportunity to discuss that matter. We tried on several occasions on meetings that were not related to 12.5% to bring it up, and it has been pushed aside. And I think what is happening today is a representation of how all of the owners feel about not being listened to.
In response to the issues raised by the TAP operators, the Transport Board's Chief Operating Officer Linda Holder says the drivers have previously benefited from a 6-month waiver on the fee during the height of the pandemic last year. She noted that, like the drivers, the Transport Board has been under significant financial pressure given the decline in travel as a result of the impact of the pandemic from since last year.
The members of the TAP are deployed under the Transport Board. And in our records, it clearly indicates that everyone, including the Transport Board, suffered from a major decline during the months of the pandemic last year. Since then, we are slowly seeing an increase in ridership as the island reopens and the correlating figures in revenue. Comparative data shows that if you compare the revenue collected during May 2020 against May 2021, there is an increase of 43%. It must be noted that the operators in the program uses facilities operated and managed by the Transport Board. They're supplied with a GPS system also paid for by the board. All of the equipment, the wibbles, the tickets, everything of that nature that they use is supplied by the Transport Board. And the payment of the operational fee is used to cover some of these costs.
Holder also challenged the operators' suggestions that they have not been able to meet with the program's officials to air their grievances.
As the last time that some members withdrew their service, which was on the 22nd of January 2021, all of the members were able to meet with the Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources and the Chairman of the Transport Board, among other officials, on the 27th of January 2021, and this was done via Zoom. After that meeting, it was agreed that the management of the Transport Board would meet regularly.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To regional news now, in Guyana, the Rastafarian community has called for the immediate suspension of jail time for small quantities of marijuana. We get more in this report from Newsroom Guyana.
The Rastafarian community explained that while government's emphasis is on the sentencing structure for persons found with marijuana, there continues to be an alienation of their rights to practice their religion freely. According to representatives from the House of Nyabingi, the criminalization of marijuana is a violation of their spiritual and cultural rights.
We need immediate suspension of jail time for marijuana, for a certain amount of marijuana. At least 2 ounces for now. Because marijuana is a free thing among the earth right now. While we being oppressed and our social life being mashed up. One's going to jail, leaving families.
One of the main concerns that I have is the fact that the previous government and this government now keeps talking about the sentencing policy, right? Which in itself has nothing to do with Rastafari rights. And what we're defending is the rights of Rastafari according to the Constitution.
So that's why no person's religion, not Rastas, no person's religion or religious belief, and this applies to all religions. But when it comes to Rasta religion, the judges, the lawyers, I don't know, no one read this.
In brief comments to the newsroom, Nandlal said with the bill already before a special select committee, government intends to engage all stakeholders, including Rastafarians.
At that special select committee, we intend to engage the stakeholders and to have their input, because we don't pass legislation that are without consultation. As far as possible, we try to engage in a consultative process.
Further afield, the United Nations Human Rights Chief said on Monday, racism against people of African descent remains systemic in many parts of the world, and she called for states to dismantle discrimination and prosecute law enforcement officials for unlawful killings.
The report was triggered following the death of George Floyd in May last year in Minneapolis, and it was requested by the 47 members of the Human Rights Council in a consensus request to the High Commissioner. The report interviewed over 340 people and received over 110 submissions and calls for radical measures. It calls for robust measures to end impunity and to make sure the human rights of people of African descent are protected worldwide. It also calls for policies and practices to investigate and to track allegations of violence by police, and to ensure that law enforcement officers are brought up to speed on human rights. Now, the report also examined 250 deaths around the world, and it came to the conclusion that 190 of these were at the hands of law enforcement officers, and the majority, 98%, occurred in Latin America, North America, and Europe. So there is a worrying trend now that the data is being examined globally.
That's news, but for the very latest, visit our website at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media and bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. You can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.